So we're doing a very special conversation now with Probal Dasgupta, who is the author of Watershed 1967, India's Forgotten Victory over China. And I thought this would actually be a very, very good time to chat with an author who's actually written and a scholarly work about a war that, or a bunch of battles that nobody ever speaks about, especially at a time when Indian and Chinese troops are in a standoff situation in Ladakh at this point of time. Probal, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out for this quick conversation with you. I'm sure, having just written this amazing book, you're also looking at what's happening in Ladakh right now. And many of the things seem so familiar, don't they, Probal? India constructing a road, the Chinese reacting in a very aggressive manner. There are echoes of what happened in 1967, except here, things are a little different. How are you seeing what's happening in Ladakh right now?
Thank you, Chef, for having me on the show. I think that's a very valid question. We're all looking closely at what's happening in Ladakh and in North Sikkim as well,
yeah,
and Lipu Lake, if I may add. So I think it's if you look at it, it's again over a period of time. As compared to 67, since you mentioned 67, one of the things that's happened is there's always, a jostling for regional influence. And I think China is trying to use surrogate means to do that. And that's a difference from 50 years back when it was a direct means of confrontation. Now it has, the way things have evolved is that for 53 years, we haven't had military hostilities, if I may put it this way, except for a stray incident in the 1970s. Given that, the current way of engaging has been through surrogate means, and that's where Nepal comes in. That's where the regional neighborhood comes in. I'm also including the regional neighborhood to give a contextual understanding of why we are at Nakula and jostling at and close to the Pangong Tso Lake in Sikkim. We have had several standoffs. There have been protocols in place, and all of that has happened, and that's why there's not been military hostilities over the years. But the timing of these incidents at this point is crucial, given the fact that there is a lot of pressure internally on Xi Jinping, as well as the global pressure post the corona, the pandemic.
Probal, speaking specifically about what's happening in Ladakh right now in the Galwan River Valley and the Fingers area of the Pangong Tso, as you mentioned, there have been stray incidents of violence along the line of actual control in different sectors over the years, which have been resolved by what I imagine are pretty robust border protocol mechanisms. There are regular meetings, etc. This one seems pretty unique, and it appears to be escalating over the days. And reports even today suggest that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Chinese troops, who are making incursions. They've entrenched themselves. Camps are being built. Reinforcements are coming. This doesn't seem normal. I mean, this doesn't seem like your, bread and butter incursion, if you will. Are you expecting this to escalate even further?
I think this will go on for a while. I don't think this will end very soon. And if you look at, again, I go back to the timing that, when India was also, it came after the weather reports had started to come in of Pakistan, etc. I think that is, sorry. So that it's been on the back of those incidents as well. I mean, given the fact that India had used the weather reports, and I think, to your point, it is a crucial junction, and given that at that place China does feel that it can send a message to India with its with an aggressive posture at that place, especially around the Galwan River north of Pangong. So I think that's something that China has been, and it's. If you look at the areas around Daulat Ber Goldi and some of the Demchok, Chumar, it's been and China has been raking up these incidents, and I think 73-day-old Doklam standoff was the oldest that we had. I think, to your question, I think it's going to be something very similar to that, or even more critical than that going forward.
Much of what we believe about China is predicated on the 1962 war defeat and the humiliation that has run over decades. I was nowhere near being born in 1962, but I have that same, sort of sense about it, and I'm sure generations do. So your book actually talks about, a pair of battles that happened only 5 years later. And it's incredible how underreported these two battles are. Yes, on the back of people's minds, they know what happened in Chola and Natula. Most people don't. But this book is actually an amazing reminder of how the last time India and China went to war, it was China that got the bloody nose.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Shiv, for the kind words. I think one of the things that, and as an ex-army officer, one of the things that I used to observe is, and I grew up hearing about these stories from my father. So one of the things that struck me was how, even officers in uniform and outside in the civilian life, I've seen people not being very much aware of India-China as much as they were aware of.
Very few people know about what happened in 67.
Yes. And also the understanding of India-Pakistan affairs is much more predominant in India as compared to India-China. Yeah. It's just that one reference of 1962. One of the things I realized that happened, and this is why the book also, if you notice, travels to a period before 1967.
Yes.
That those 2 years, the 1965, which I was talking about, the 1965 India-Pakistan War,
yes,
is one of those turning points, because the civil-military relationship had changed. The kind of interference that was there in 1962, and the lack of robust leadership, both at the political and as well as the military level in 1962 was and the high-handedness, that had changed. And that change was evident in 67. And 67 was also important in determining how China doesn't interfere in the 1971 war, India-Pakistan war. Some of these things do come up, in terms of in terms of the impact of 1967 on India-China relations in the immediate aftermath of the 71 war, as well as the integration of Sikkim in the 1970s. So it had its impact. And subsequently, in terms of another, near skirmish in 1986 in Somdorungchu, where again India had the better of China, and in the standoff thereafter. So it's set the template. It's changed the narrative, and from that standpoint, I thought that was a game changer, an inflection point, and thus a watershed.
Do you think, one final question to you, Probal, is, do you think that the current standoff in Eastern Ladakh could escalate into something worse, or is it just about this situation sort of in a small way escalating each day, but it won't actually explode into something worse?
Well, that's a very intriguing question, an interesting one. Given that the way we have handled the past disputes, I don't expect this to go over the edge. As I said, there are priorities on the economic and political front and things at stake between India and China as well. So I think it'll be a little churlish to really have this go beyond our control on both sides. I think that's something that we don't expect. Having said that, things do happen, and we know where soldiers at high altitudes having brawls and skirmishes. One wrong move on the trigger can escalate into something bigger and something worse, and that's something that we need to watch out for. Having looked at the past disputes, I wouldn't expect it to go into a juncture which is worse than this. But I think it will escalate for a while. The standoff will continue, and given that China is facing pressure, as I said, it needs to be seen in the larger context, and that's where I think it'll be.
Probal, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And once again, congratulations on your book. It's something I highly recommend. I would recommend this anyway, but especially at a time when India and China are making headlines, for that unpleasantness that's happening in that standoff in Ladakh. This is a great book to actually read, to understand what it was like when India and China last went to war. Probal, thank you so much. Great having you.
Thank you, Shiv. Thank you. It was wonderful chatting. Thanks.